Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ramadan Mubarak, everybody. How are you guys already doing? Welcome to Rican Muslim. I'm your host, Rican Muslim. Subscribe, like, comment, and share. So this has been like the year of all the hypocrisy that the West has been doing. It seems that all their lies, their schemes have been brought out to bear for the world. Africa is finally standing up to their oppressors and slave masters. So yeah, I just started kind of thought, you know what, let's start a series and kind of just start showing all these things as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is doing something amazing. So yeah, let's just show what's going on around the world, shall we?
Mr. Roman, are you aware that we are sending $40 million a week to the Taliban?
Yes, sir.
40
Can you name
a
other
week.
instances of foreign aid going to terrorist organizations?
We have assisted al-Shabaab in Somalia. There's been instances of the Khamsi network in Sudan, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, Kataib al-Hezbollah, Hayat Tahrir al-Shams in Syria. Dozens of terror organizations have received indirect assistance from U.S. foreign aid.
But I thought they were the bad guys. Weird.
Let's use Gaza as our case study. $2.1 billion in American taxpayers' money to Gaza since October 7th when Hamas invaded southern Israel. USAID money was going in terms of an emergency use authorization to try to go to parties that USAID formerly had a relationship with in the Gaza Strip.
How did terrorists exploit our foreign aid loopholes?
You have international NGOs and UN agencies actively lobby here in Washington, D.C. against vetting policies that would prevent it. I was the senior vetting officer at USAID, and what
Hold on
we
a second. Did you say United Nations is doing this? The UN?
Sure, everybody who's getting money lobbies here.
So the taxpayers
Weird.
fund this lobbyist who's working against American interests.
Correct.
Possibly killing our allies and possibly Americans.
They bring together groups in Washington that overseas work with groups that kill Americans.
How do these programs compromise our national security, Mr. Premack?
They actually push China. They actually push much of the world towards China on the green energy agenda. They push people, ordinary people, billions of people towards China because of the resentment caused by our social reengineering.
Social reengineering? Wait, social reengineering?
I now recognize the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Burchett, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Mr. Roman, are you aware that we are sending $40 million a week to the Taliban?
Yes, sir.
Can you name other instances of foreign aid going to terrorist organizations?
We have assisted al-Shabaab in Somalia. There's been instances of the Khamsi network in Sudan, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, Kataib al-Hezbollah, Hayat Tahrir al-Shams in Syria. Dozens of terror organizations have received indirect assistance from U.S. foreign aid.
Could you elaborate a little bit on the mechanisms in place that are to stop foreign aid from going to terrorist groups, and why are they not working if we have any in place?
Sure.
And I would note that these are, you notice these are terrorist weaponry. You see some AKs, SKSs, some snipers, some clips, some clip carriers probably made in China, and I believe these are small landmines here beside right there.
Let's use Gaza as our case study. $2.1 billion in American taxpayers' money to Gaza since October 7th when Hamas invaded southern Israel. USAID money was going in terms of an emergency use authorization to try to go to parties that USAID formerly had a relationship with in the Gaza Strip. They had to have been vetted by OFAC. They should have been vetted against the special designated terror list from the State Department and from other Treasury organizations. Waivers were granted because they said that there was an emergency use to have that money come in to Gaza, thereby jettisoning the usual typical screening procedures.
If that much money was going in there, they will have even more resources than what they have now. It's 2.1 billion. So, of course, I like how they always say, "Well, let's just talk about Gaza. Why don't you talk about the Taliban? How about Al Qaeda, which is and was a CIA asset, which was also used in Syria. They were funding Syria, or they were, quote, fighting them in Afghanistan. I like how they just completely circumvented all of that and only want to talk about Gaza. weird. So weird.
As a result, 90% of aid that was going from the United States by way of its agents in Gaza ended up in Hamas-controlled areas.
So
this
$2
is
billion.
ridiculous.
So they got $2 billion.
Essentially, what the U.S. assistance to Gaza did was underwrite the ability for Hamas to survive until the ceasefire was just passed a few weeks ago.
Alhamdulillah.
There was no strategic thought for it, and there was no screening.
Seems like the emergency might have been armed terrorists to kill civilians. Would that be accurate?
That's accurate, and even
Civilians.
more
I
than
like
that,
that.
Samantha Powers, the administrator,
Because the only civilians that were killed was because of Hamas. Jeez. Gotta love these people, man. They have absolutely no soul whatsoever.
for USAID, was intent on having Israel not be able to defend itself.
To not be able to defend it.
Correct.
We've given Israel
Mr. Primorak.
over
is
$2
that
trillion.
correct? How do you say that? Primorak? I got Burchett, man. Nobody gets mine right, so don't worry about it. What is it, Primorak?
Perfect.
All right, thanks, brother. How did terrorists exploit our foreign aid loopholes?
Well, we have a lot of our
Can
international.
you pull your mic up? I'm sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
You have international NGOs and UN agencies actively lobby here in Washington, D.C. against vetting policies that would prevent it. I was the senior vetting officer at USAID, and what
Hold on
we
a second. Did you say United Nations is doing this? The UN?
Sure, everybody who's getting money lobbies here.
Have bought it.
They're lobbying.
He was gonna say everybody has bought Congress. That's pretty much what we're gonna say.
Against us. I'm sorry, Mr. Roman.
There's actually someone who used to work for one of those lobbies, the largest NGO lobby, Interaction. One of our co-witnesses here worked for them from 2018 to 2023. USAID effectively self-funds its own external private lobby that then goes back to Congress and asks for more money for USAID.
So the taxpayers fund this lobbyist who's working against American interests.
Correct.
Possibly killing our allies and possibly Americans.
They bring together groups
Possibly.
Washington that oversees work with groups that kill Americans.
Yeah, I don't need a flow chart to show that. I appreciate it. Do you think USAID programs have been aligned with the national security interests of the U.S.?
No, they have not. They have actually helped China.
Mr. Roman?
No.
Okay. How do these programs compromise our national security, Mr. Primorak?
They actually push China. They actually push much of the world towards China on the green energy agenda. They push people, ordinary people, billions of people towards China because of the resentment caused by our social re-engineering.
Social re-engineering. You have to love the word salad that comes out of them. Wow. Social re-engineering. He's literally talking about toppling governments, what we now see as Libya, which have open slave markets. That is called social engineering. I like the word salad. I think they're getting better with word salad.
Are we being lobbied by these pro-communist China groups currently?
Well, a lot of these countries don't even have to lobby because they get the money anyway, like South Africa.
Yeah, and in fact, these lobbyists have come to the House and have tried to kill legislation like H.R. 160, which was meant to increase transparency in USAID's funding of overseas organizations.
Is that a current piece of legislation?
That's from the last session.
And give me that number again.
H.R. 160.
And what does it do?
It was meant to give U.S. lawmakers the ability to have higher transparency in terror financing investigations aimed at scrutinizing extremist groups.
I like how they say like South Africa, because now them blacks, they want South Africa, which is 80% black, to be more black. Gross.
Mr. Primorak?
We had a regulation before we left in the last administration that anybody who touches money in countries where there's terrorists, those names have to go through databases, terrorist databases. That was overturned by Biden.
Overturned by Biden. Chair Lady, I am currently 5 seconds, but I wanted to mention something. There's a lot of rhetoric used on this committee, and I would urge my friends on both sides of the aisle, let's stick to the actual information. This rhetoric is, I've received death threats, and I know the Chair Lady has, and it needs to stop. We need to tone it down. Thank you, Chair Lady, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burchett.
Madam Chairwoman, I'd like to ask for unanimous consent to enter a few items into the record relating to the waivers that have been provided by the Secretary. And because Mr. Burchett just went now, there is some reporting, and perhaps he's in the room if he'd like to respond, Madam Chair. In this reporting, it says that Representative Burchett told a reporter that he has a real problem with a report that 2 DOGE employees blocked PEPFAR funding that should have been granted a waiver by the Secretary, and said that if it was a mistake, they should have been fired. We also have numerous reports here that these waivers may exist, but they are not being enforced, and there are thousands of federal aid workers across the world right now that are stranded, as well as international aid that is sitting in ports and docks.
If you have the documentation without objection.
I'm not sure if my name was besmirched. If I'm allowed to respond or not? It's fine either way.
No, it's just a report. I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah, I like how when the Taliban, Al Qaeda, that was mentioned, Africa, the things they've been doing in Africa, way longer than the war on terrorism. We're just going to just completely ignore that. We're just going to bypass that. Let me just talk about, you know where, Gaza and Hamas. Hamas. Yes, I'm sure they got $2 billion of money. I don't think people, I think, because the American people are dumb. They don't understand how much $2 billion is on there. That would be enough to completely and utterly, I mean, they'll be able to get all kinds of more stuff. Are you kidding me? You know how much that could, but I like how he left Israel defenseless. We have given them over $2 trillion in aid. They have the most sophisticated weaponry ever. When we get something new, they get it as well. Not to mention the dome and everything else, but they are defenseless. It's good to see little things that are coming out that people were going to start scrutinizing and looking more into. Keep on praying and keep on just seeing the destruction that from everything they sowed, now they're reaping. Let me know what you guys think about this video. Subscribe, like, comment, and share. And until next time.